This Honourable Senate now resumes its sitting. I want to welcome some students today from the Manning School. Welcome to this sitting of the Senate. You have come from a pretty far way, I believe. The Parliament is yours. You're always welcome to come and participate by observing the proceedings here. If there are any questions that you have, there are persons that can answer those questions. So hope that you enjoy your stay with us today, and maybe you will aspire to one of these days sitting over here or over here as members of this Honourable Senate. Welcome again to, or even here. That is Senator Knight indicating that he has knowledge that you are the second oldest high school in Jamaica. So we are privileged to have you, and welcome. You're welcome to return anytime. To write to the Clerk of the House of Parliament, the House of Law, the United Kingdom, with respect to offering our condolences to the persons who had died as a result of the terror attack in the precincts of the United Kingdom Parliament. The Clerk of the House of Lords, on behalf of the Lord Speaker and members of that House, have acknowledged our kind sentiments and sent us best regards. So we make note of that. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Minister Paper number 25 on the National Youth Parliament. Annual report on audited financial statements of the Kingston Free Zone Company Limited for the years 2014-15 and 2016 and 2016. The Radio and Telegraph Control Act. The Radio and Telegraph Control Amateur Radio Service Amendment Regulations 2017 under the Radio and Telegraph Control Act. Office of the Contractor General, Special Report of Investigations conducted into the procurement related to expenditure associated with hosting the Jamaica 50 celebration activities.
Clerk, do you give us a list of the documents that have been tabled? Okay. Thank you very much. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
Mr. President, just advising that we are awaiting bills in relation to the public service pension scheme. We're waiting their arrival from the printery. So I'm going to ask at a later stage that we recommit this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Petitions, papers, reports from questions and answers to questions.
Mr. President, the leader of government business has been kind enough. The Minister of Education, Youth and Information is absent, but I'm wondering if there's any information from the government side in respect to questions 2 and 3, and cost of visits by the Prime Minister since March.
Those are questions in your name, Senator Brown.
That is correct, Mr. President.
Minister?
Mr. President, regretfully, I will have to say that I need an update from the Minister of Education, Youth and Information, who is managing the matter. If I were to give a more specific and should be his efforts.
Sorry, Senator Brown, you have indicated that he's coming to this session. If you could get an indication and motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without leave of the...
Mr. President, today it is intended to proceed with the debate on the arbitration bill, or rather arbitration bill, and proceed thereafter to close the debate on the motion put forward by Senator Skeffery in relation to the funding of tertiary education. So without more, Mr. President, I would ask Senator Charles Jr., who has been piloting the arbitration bill, to continue to so do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I just want to make a comment on the process that we're undergoing here. We have come this morning to find almost a book of amendments to the bill. I'm sure I'll be told that some of them are restating provisions in relation of conduct what is now being put on the table to go in the Senate.
With a large corporation a list of amendments, I think, be at efficiency of the process when you have seen what has actually been changed. Mr. President, I'm asking for cooperation given the consultation that has been on today.
President,
Thank you, Minister.
the leader of government business knows that we are always cooperative in trying to get the best legislation possible for Jamaica. And there's no change to that. Her confidence that the amendments reflect the benefits of consultations that have been had since we tabled and debated the bill 2 weeks ago. But you see, Mr. President, we have an obligation as senators to satisfy ourselves of that. And we have not had an opportunity in terms of review that and today. And I've heard much of the text is moving provisions that were in the schedule into the body of the bill, but there are other clauses which are new as well. So I'm just saying that obviously if the minister's intent on proceeding today, I just want to register our disapproval of it, our objection to the way in which this is being proceeded with. I don't think it's necessary because this thing is, we're going to live with this bill for years. We've had an arbitration bill for 100 years or more before, and Honourable is. I've said what I have to say on it, and I'll leave it to the judgment of the minister to decide how she wishes to proceed.
Thank you, Senator Golden. I think I got the sense from the minister. I don't know if there is any necessity for further discussion. I want to just welcome in the interim. Sorry, what is it, Senator Knight? Just to welcome some young men from Monroe College. I don't know what you all have done recently to warrant such a rowdy welcome, but welcome to the Parliament of Jamaica. And as I indicated from the youngsters from Mannings, it's your Parliament, you're always welcome here, and I trust that you'll enjoy your day with us. Senator Knight, you were saying? And this, of course, is the school that won the school challenge quiz this year. I think you all won it on the wire, so a special congratulations to you. As I said to you, welcome. It's your Parliament. Of all the students, it's your Parliament, so you're always welcome here to observe. Senator Knight, I think you were saying something.
President, I had made some interventions in relation to the bill. But let me speak generally first. Leader of government business, don't let this be contentious. There are other occasions on which we may have some real strong differences. On this, I think we have worked well in bringing about the amendments. The minister who who piloted the bill, was quite appreciative of the comments that had been made from the government side and from the opposition side. And on my part, I'm particularly pleased that he took the time to have the necessary consultation and to have apparently accommodated some of the suggestions that we made. It is only right, it is only fair, it is only reasonable that we should have an opportunity.
Is sufficiently reasonable. I want to say that it's really not just a function of your persuasive abilities, but I recall how I felt on that side when I was presented with a 300-page bill, which we had no chance to review. And it happened on more than one occasion. And I recall the frustration at being unable to bring everything to the fore, and that was not regretfully often taken on board. So in an effort to do better, I'm suggesting this compromise, that we actually make some progress, we use the time well today, and then all things remaining equal.
You know, your suggestion is very attractive, and your suggestions normally are very attractive. But there's a flaw. We need to be able to follow this. We need to be able to look at the bill, to look at the arguments that had been presented on either side, and then be prepared. President, you know what it is to be prepared, and you know what it is when others are unprepared.
Do not direct your persuasive talents to the president. What I'm going to suggest, Senator Knight, since there is a suggestion for some amount of compromise, I find some amount of favor. Well, first of all, I find great sympathy with the position voiced by yourself and Senator being in a position before where we have had to proceed with legislation where we don't have any time to look at. I know how impotent it makes one feel, but I think that there is a suggestion that the minister who is piloting the bill would go through, put the amendments on the record, and then you have sufficient time to look at them later on. It seems to me that it's a compromise.
President, you were in the Senate when we dealt with the plea bargaining legislation. You were on that side as you are now, and we on this side as we are now. And we pleaded
the regulation
for 1 week. You know the plea bargaining, and I mentioned that.
Those regulations.
The regulation. We pleaded for a week,
yeah,
and it was said no, we couldn't get a week.
Yeah.
And today,
Have a new act.
today, because of that, that regime is still not functioning. 1 week. It is not just the appearance of doing work that is important. It's doing work properly that is important. And all this would give is the appearance that we are doing some work. But the quality of the work would be affected. How can I possibly be content to just to listen to the minister as he goes through these amendments? And I'm sure that he will do so eloquently. But how can I be content with that without being able to engage myself in all of this based on what my notes say from the speakers on that side and from the speakers on this side? How can I properly comprehend what he's saying when, unlike him, I didn't have the opportunity to go through it? He has.
You have a brief.
He has. I haven't. What is it that is so, if you just tell me, I will accept personally, without more. If you tell me what is so urgent about it, that 1 week's delay will have a debilitating effect on our economy, then I will go with you on this, because I would hate to be contributing to something that is inimical to our well-being. If you can tell me why we must do it this week and not the next sitting, I say not one further word on it, but just go along with it willingly in support of your prosperity agenda.
Mr. President, I always enjoy being treated to the Senator's eloquence. I do. And I say that with all sincerity. And I appreciate the commitment to trotting the path to prosperity. Don't spoil it, Mark. Don't spoil it. The very matter which the Senator has indicated places him at a disadvantage, I wish to ask him to view as an advantage in terms of how that we close the proceedings today. What I'm proposing is that we make use of the time that has been made for the Senator who has been briefed to take us through the changes so they may be understood and their intent also be understood. Where it is that this does not ring soundly, where it is that on your further review over the Easter weekend, which you would prefer to spend inside with these documents rather than fishing, when you review in that context, while you review you will have the benefit at that time of the intent that has been explained to you. And if the clauses fall short, then on the 21st you can point out. But if not, then the 21st will be that much shorter of a sitting, as we will have the pension bills to deal with at that point. So I ask that you just facilitate us in facilitating a greater understanding of what has been put forward, and then we'll close on the 21st. I don't think it's unreasonable, and it will not, I think, in any way strain your powers of comprehension today. So, Mr. President, on that note, I wish to ask, and having really sincerely taken under consideration. I think this is balanced enough an approach to ensure that we keep the agenda moving and that you do have enough time to consider the matters. And in that context, Mr. President, I wish to ask Senator Charles to pick up the mantle at this point to take us through his responses to items raised by members last week.
And you are going to get some instruction from Senator Reid. No, but let's get the instruction now so you can take it later. Senator Charles, you have my permission to speak from a seat other than your own.
Thank you, Mr. President. He's right. I didn't. Mr. President, let me first acknowledge the sincere and the substantive contributions of my colleagues on both sides and thank them for the recommendations and also the evaluation and examination of the bill, a lot of which has been incorporated into the amendments, which is why they are so lengthy. I also want to reiterate, as the leader of government business did, the thanks to the Jamaica Bar Association, other colleagues, particularly also to Senator Golding, who took his time outside of the Senate to discuss a few of these issues as well, and to the team to my left, Mr. Malcolm and others, who toiled over the recommendations and the suggestions from our senators for it to be put into these amendments as we have before us today. Now, what I'll do, Mr. President, is to just generally address in general terms the issues that will move us forward, but we can deal with the details of the amendments in the committee stage. As we know, the bill before us is relating to intention to modernize the framework for arbitration in Jamaica and at the same time to bring us in line with the best practices across the globe as applied to both domestic and international arbitration. And it is also important as we restart our debate just to put in context, and it relates to a lot of the issues that were raised by Senator Knight and Senator Fraser Binns. It must be underscored that within our context, in our jurisdiction, litigation operates in a system where our judges have a constitutional obligation to serve the interest of justice. On the other hand, the arbitrator in the proceedings of this nature have a contractual obligation to honor the terms specifically of the contract. And I think that general phrasing should put us within the context to understand a lot of the recommendations that have been accepted and those that have not been accepted because of the distinction between these arbitration proceedings as opposed to court proceedings. It is important for us also, Mr. President, to bear in mind how we are viewed as a jurisdiction within the international context and by extension whether we are able to attract international work. And that will in large part depend on how we treat with arbitration at a domestic level and so cause our international participants to have the necessary confidence in us and in our capacity to understand and manage their disputes. Mr. President, that leads me to one of the important issues that were raised by my colleague Senator Golding as it relates to the issue of the definition that we have in Section 2. And that section is intended to be commercial arbitration only or domestic arbitration in general terms. And as you had suggested, Senator Golding, it is domestic arbitration in general terms, and I want you to also indicate that those recommendations have been incorporated into the have also been amended accordingly. So there's no need for us to have separate domestic and international parts of the bill. The other clerical and grammatical errors that were raised have also been accepted in general part. And what I'll do is go through the amendments as best as possible. Clause 2, as I said, subsection 1, we have inserted immediately after the word domestic the word arbitration. So it would be domestic arbitration and international commercial arbitration. Clause 2.2, we have deleted the subsection 2 and substituted therefore the following: the provisions of this Act, except sections 11, 12, 28, 29, 30, 56, and 57, which apply only if the place of... To clause 3.1, we have inserted next after the definition of international arbitration the following, which is that the mediator, the dispute with a view to resolving or reducing the extent of the dispute. Clause 9, you would see the deletion of the numerals as was suggested and substitution as was recommended. Same for clause 16.2, where we have deleted the words or for. Clause 17, that has seen the separation of the word de jure, as was suggested by Senator Golden. Also subsection 2, we've deleted the words or for again. The same clerical amendments have been made for clause 19.2.9. Move on to clause 21, where we have inserted next after clause 20 the following, which is the conditions for granting the interim measures. I won't go through the full detail of all of that reading because it's on your amendment sheet. I take you to clause 22, applications for preliminary orders and conditions for granting of the preliminary orders. Let me take you, instead of going through all of it, what I'll do, let me take you, Senator Knight, you had mentioned as part of your recommendations, specific those. As best as possible, what I will do is try to remind you of what you had recommended. I wrote them down very specifically. Well, a lot of the recommendations that were made by you, Senator Knight, referred to the operation of the arbitration proceedings and how it will be juxtaposed in relation to court proceedings, and whether or not the layout of the bill would have undermined any certainty of the arbitration determination. And I want to alleviate your fears. As I had indicated before, it must be underscored that there is that distinction between the litigation operation and the arbitration proceeding, whereby the arbitrator has a contractual obligation to honor the terms of the contract. And so, however unattractive the feature may seem, if it is that the parties seek to introduce it to the arbitration proceeding, they can do so. And I say that in relation to the concerns you raised with regards to clause 37, and also in relation to the concerns you raised with regards to the time strictures, the period. It is the clause 37 in the bill that we had 2 weeks ago. It is the one that relates to the application for setting aside as exclusive recourse against arbitral award. And it also relates to the time period you had suggested that it was a short period and suggested an extension to 6 months. And so I can indicate that the 3-month period is a standard period in which the parties, including the arbitrator, if they want a longer period, as I said before, they can contract for that to be introduced into the arbitration agreement. Also, another primary issue that was raised by you, Senator Knight, had to do with the definition, the difference between recognition and enforcement, and also between recourse and recognition. And so let me say that and that relates to 36, clause 36.2. Recourse in that context against award is done in regards to a domestic level where the award is made, as opposed to recognition relating to a foreign jurisdiction where enforcement is being sought. And so that is something which, if contemplated, it gives a clear understanding as to why that clause has been laid out as it is. So no amendment is really needed there once you put those distinctions into context. I think in general terms that deals with a lot of the amendments that you had suggested. And in committee we can go through in detail, clause by clause, to treat with it. Senator Binns also had made some recommendations that relate to the provision for confidentiality, also with regards to how the arbitration proceedings would be carried out, as to restrictions on who could be called as witnesses, and whether or not there should be stays of proceedings. And again, it is important for us in understanding the reasons and the way that the bill has put forward the operation of the arbitration proceeding to be reminded of the distinction between the arbitration proceedings and the court proceedings. And if you do so, it will lead you to an understanding that it is a private process, but it is not necessarily. And so, if the parties want confidentiality, they have the capacity to contract for it in that regard. And that is the foundation of understanding of this bill and of the purpose of it. And that is really the context within the international community is going to be looking on us to be able to be certain that if they engage in arbitration proceedings, they won't have to contend with our jurisdiction, treating with the matters in a different way, with a different capacity as our friends and partners across the world. With regards to the issues of the restrictions of persons being called as witnesses, I'll say that calling an arbitrator as a witness would certainly be unusual, as similar as you would say it would be unusual to call a judge as a witness. But in the event, again, because of the nature of it, I think that is something that would have to be discussed between the parties, and it will be subject to the agreement of the parties. Again, this is where you see that autonomy is sovereign, and justifiably so. The other issues that were raised by you, Senator Fraser Binns, in specific terms, we can deal with those as we go through in committee stage, clause by clause. I know the last recommendation you asked that be withdrawn. But the others, as I said, similarly, they're founded on that basis where you have the capacity to define the terms and conditions of the agreement. And that is within the knowledge and understanding of the parties. Mr. President, I think that we can move to treat with these specific issues in committee stage, but I'll say in general terms that I believe that the general concerns that were raised by Senator Golding had to do with issues which we've treated with. And because we had the opportunity to discuss the matters outside of Senate, most of those matters have been attended to, and those grammatical issues, you will see that in committee stage we can address the intricacies of those. I don't think we have to go through much more at this stage. I'd ask for the Leader of Government Business to take us to committee, and I'll have an opportunity to take us in detail, clause by clause.
So I think the question is that the question is that the debate be suspended at this point.
I crave indulgence, President. Oh, I crave indulgence, Mr. President. I didn't see. I thought you said that. Mr. President, I am guided that considering the erudite submissions of Senator Knight and in consideration of what the Leader of Government Business has said, that we will not be going into committee stage at this time, but rather that we'll be doing so at the next sitting of the Senate. I won't say next week, because perhaps we may not be sitting on Good Friday.
The question is that the debate be suspended until the next sitting of the Senate, at which point the matter will go to committee. Those in favor? Aye. Against? So be it. Minister?
Yes, Mr.
Mr. President, thank you. It is now intended for us to proceed with the conclusion of the debate on the motion by Senator Skeffery.
If I may, Mr. President, I just wanted to ask one question before we move on. I was flipping through the amendments and I see provisions dealing with foreign lawyers undertaking arbitrations here and exempting them from the Legal Profession Act and so on. And I was just wondering if a legal counsel reviewed those provisions.
So far as I in the knowledge of the Leader of Government meeting that Senator Golding had attended with members of the Bar Association and members of the Ministry of Justice and Parliamentary, and that was sent to Legal Reform Committee of Bar Association, and they had considered all the issues and signed off on them as they were treated.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking whether the General Legal Counsel, the regulator of the legal profession, whose powers arise under the Profession Act, is aware of the provisions in the bill, in the amendments, which would exclude the operation of that act to
orders to enable me to take this motion. Mr. President, I now move for the suspension.
The question is that must be suspended to allow the member to take the notice of motion that he had given earlier. In favor?
I ask that the motion be approved.
The question is that the motion be in favor? Aye. Against? Ayes have it. I think a question had been asked concerning some outstanding questions which fall to you.
Mr. President, I anticipate that the next sitting I should be in a position to answer some of those questions. We actually are far advanced in the preparation. The
two questions that were asked by Senator Brown. the two sets of questions asked by Senator Brown. Thank you very much. We will now proceed with the continuation of the debate on the motion moved by Senator Skeffery. I think that Senator Morris, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I do rise to give my full support, and I would just like to take the opportunity to just repeat what is the substance of the motion and what the mover is asking for. Be it resolved that A, this Honourable Senate examines the issue of funding of tertiary education with the aim of establishing the most affordable means of financing the education of students at this level. B, this examination takes into account the government's financial contribution to this means of education, the contribution from students, the Students' Loan Bureau, and contribution from the private sector. Be it further resolved that the members of this Honourable Senate call upon the government to create a special fund where citizens can access funding for the education of their children at the tertiary level. Mr. President, I want to personally commend the mover of this motion. Mr. President, the mover of the motion, and I am of the West Indies in 1994, and we resided on the hallowed walls of the Great Taylor Hall. And I'm certain that Senator Williams and that would be familiar with that hall. Mr. President, these are some of the issues that Senator Skeffery and I and others debated from time to time whilst we were on the university campus. And I'm extremely proud of the fact that he has not forgotten those discussions and has taken it to a higher level in the Honourable Senate, where he has moved a motion to debate the issue. And I am really heartened by the fact that he has moved this motion. Mr. President, I am particularly disappointed, however, in the start of the debate, the response from the Honourable Minister of Education in his upfront rejection of the call for a special fund to be created to assist students at the tertiary level. And I think that in debates such as this, Mr. President, we have to examine and look at the merits of the arguments, because Senator Skeffery's motion is based on a lived experience and the particular challenges that he experienced at the University of the West Indies and the current challenges that students are experiencing at the tertiary level. And, Mr. President, I have to support the motion because whilst at the University of the West Indies, I was deeply involved with student governance, having become the first blind person to successfully contest a guild election at the university, and was charged with the responsibility of leading negotiations for students at that institution, which had a ripple effect for other tertiary institutions. And so I understand fully well, Senator Charles, because you were there as well, what the motion is seeking to accomplish. I want to also point out, Mr. President, that the student loan is there to assist students. And I want to point out as well that the student loan primarily provides tuition support for students at the tertiary level. There is a grant that is provided, but that grant is not available to all. And there are other expenses that students have to encounter that the student loan does not cater to and provide for. So, you take, for example, accommodation, housing, books, transportation, lunch, that the students at the tertiary level will have to encounter. So there's a plethora of other expenses that they will have to encounter. And what the mover of the motion is saying, let us put in place a dedicated fund that will assist these students in terms of the various expenses that they will encounter. And I readily identify with that, because when you look at the current range for accommodation, for example, for students at one of the tertiary institutions, you see that it is ranging from anywhere upwards of 300,000 to over 600,000 per annum that it can cost. And in light of the recent property tax increases, I am certain that they are going to see further increases in housing at these institutions. So, what Senator Skeffery is asking for Senator Morrison is for more facilities to be put in place to assist students studying at the tertiary level. And you, Senator Morrison, who resided on Taylor Hall of Halls, should certainly identify with this motion, because it is identifying with the students and their struggles. And a vote for this motion, is a vote to support the students at the tertiary level. And a vote against is an indictment against the students at the tertiary level.
That's right.
And so I am going to be putting my support for this motion because I understand very well what it means for individuals who are studying at the tertiary level. At the University of the West Indies, where I currently work, from time to time, students come to me and seeking information as to where they can go to get additional support for their tertiary education. And I have to find ways and means of guiding those individuals and pointing them in a direction so that the capacity. I know the argument about the reduction of interest rate for students studying in certain disciplines at the tertiary level, that there's a reduction in the interest rate, and I commend the administration for that. But you know, Mr. President, and I happen to have done some investigation and checked, because there was a news that pointed out that student loan was going to see a reduction in the capital expenditure, or the amount of funds available to it on lending to students, $100 million. But I subsequently learned that there is a particular facility that has been negotiated by the Minister of Education, where that is concerned. And I am happy at that particular. There won't be sufficient funds to deal with the expenses that these students have to encounter. Now, Mr. President, over the years, we have seen a significant growth in the population of students at the tertiary level. 1973, we had about just over 5,000 students studying at the tertiary level. In 1993, when I just went into the University of the West Indies, we had just over 10,000. I checked the data for 2016, and we had over 43,000 students at the tertiary level. It means that since 1973 and now, the population of students studying at the tertiary level has increased by 8-fold. Significant. Significant. And I want to point out that it just never happened just like that. It had to do with progressive policies that have been formulated over the years. Because it started with the declaration in 1974 for universal free education by then Prime Minister Michael Mann. And then in the 1990s, a deliberate policy intention or policy framework to expand access at the tertiary level, creating a number of tertiary institutions, universities. That's when we saw Northern Caribbean University, West Indies College getting university status. The MICO getting university status. CAST being upgraded to the University of Technology. And a host of other tertiary degree granting institutions. And Mr. President, I am happy at the progress that we have seen in terms of Jamaicans accessing tertiary level education. You see, Mr. President, the late, great Nelson Mandela said that education is a weapon that we have that should be used to transform and empower our people. To transform and empower our people. And I am seeing more and more of our people taking the opportunity to empower themselves and going straight up to the tertiary level. And we have to create more mechanisms that will allow these individuals to maximize their potential, and we have to give them the support. And that is what the motion is asking for us to look at the existing mechanisms and also to put in place additional ones to bolster support for these individuals. Nothing wrong with that, Senator Skeffery, and I commend you for that, Senator Skeffery. Mr. President, well, he touched me, and that wasn't Sophia's touch. That was Senator Skeffery's touch.
He knows the difference.
Mr. President, you know, Cuba has placed a significant emphasis on education. And it's because its great leader, Fidel Castro, said that education is what they had and that he was going to use that to transform and empower his people. And they have 47 universities and over 400,000 Cubans who are studying at the tertiary level currently. 400,000. And they have provided countries such as Jamaica with scholarship to benefit from their tertiary system. And we want to acknowledge their contribution to our own education of our people at the tertiary level over the years. And I mention that, Mr. President, because I am a fervent believer myself in education. It is what has caused me to be where I am today. A little country boy who, when I was going to primary school, my mother, who is a dressmaker, said that all that we have is our God-given brain. And so you are going to use it to the best of your ability, and you must take education seriously. And so when blindness or the challenges that I was experiencing with my sight at high school came, and when I got blind eventually at age 20 and was staring down the barrel of a gun called poverty, the only thing that I had to look forward to rescue me was education. And I responded to that and went back into the education system after getting rehabilitated at the Jamaica Society for the Blind. went to university, get a first degree, get a master's degree, and successfully defended a PhD research. And that is why, Mr. President, I have to stand up and support this resolution, Honourable Minister, because what it is asking for is for a facility or an additional facility to be put in place. I support anything that is progressive. I support anything that is progressive. You don't listen to my radio program, Mr. You don't listen to my radio program, Mr. Minister. Yes. You don't listen to my radio program. So, but Mr. President, Honourable Minister, members, I have to support this resolution because what it is asking for is for a mechanism to be put in place so that the cane cutter's child from Frome in Westmoreland can get an opportunity to access tertiary education. What this motion is asking for is for an opportunity where a dressmaker's daughter in Duckan Field can gain access to tertiary education. What it is asking for, Mr. President, what it is asking for, it is for members, a mechanism to be put in place where members of the community of persons with disabilities can access tertiary education. And this is why, Mr. President, and this is why I have to wholeheartedly support this resolution. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, President Morris. Just before the next speaker rises, I just ask the members visiting from Monroe and Mannings to recognize that you have just received an inspiration from Senator Morris, and I hope that you listen to his story of his progress through education and that you take note of it and apply it to your own circumstances. Senator Gale. Senator Gale.
Mr. President, I rise to participate in this very important motion, and I support its objective. Listen, there are some very critical costs to students at the university level. Tuition fees, books, periodicals, journals, materials and equipment, accommodation, transportation, meals, clothing, medical care, and even entertainment is important. And so, this motion to support funding and access to education is critical. But we have to agree on what can be the desire of a positive outcome of our education system. Let us agree that we must align our education and training system towards economic growth and job creation. We're operating in a global world, Mr. President, where there are no boundaries or barriers, where jobs can move freely as economies shift. We're now dealing with new job models, new certification of competencies, and the mobility of jobs, and so the future of employability must be our sharp focus. Due to what I consider as the new world of work, Mr. President, and the future needs and requirements, we have to now shift gears and develop new guiding principles to ensure that our education and training system is consistent with labor market demands that facilitates employment creation and the social and economic development strategies. Mr. President, let's recognize that there is a misalignment between the education and training system and the labor market. And these issues are the challenges why, students at the tertiary level have this problem with the cost. What has this caused? It has caused an inability for employers to meet the demands of their market for products and services due to a difficulty in recruiting qualified staff. It has created increased underemployment among workers. It has created a low rate of employment absorption among graduates. And more profoundly, Mr. President, there is a failure to effectively respond to labor demands, both local and foreign jobs, in creating investment. So, Mr. President, Jamaica has to change this. There has to be a policy convergence where skills and employment policies should be viewed together. We have to connect the basic education to the technical training and then to the market. Mr. President, to sustain this, it requires us ensuring that there will always be continued communication between employers and training providers, such as our universities, so that training meets the needs and aspirations of workers and enterprises. We also have to anticipate the future skills needed. So building skills for the future is essential to a rapidly changing labor market. And this applies to changes in the types of levels of skill needed as well as the occupational and technical areas. So, Mr. President, access to finance and sustaining that financial support is critical to our students. And there are ways and methods to anticipate the future support and access to financing towards education. Mr. President, it requires sustained dialogue between private equity support, such as my colleague here on the right, and training institutions, especially at the tertiary level. It further requires, Mr. President, coordination across government institutions where there's a homogeneous approach towards an education strategy. It further requires an enhancement of the labor market information system to deter priority support placed. And it calls for close performance reviews and strategic development of training institutions. Mr. President, whatever we do, a great deal of effort is required to ensure that our university system delivers both the quantity and the quality of training that is needed. Mr. President, tertiary education and training of both public and private tertiary institutions makes a fundamental contribution to developing the skills and intellectual capacity of aspiring professionals for both the local and international labor force. I checked some data, and data supplied by the University of the West Indies and the University of Technology and other tertiary institutions in 2015 suggests that the output total some 15,004 graduates. Interesting, the data further suggested that 10,820 were female and just 4,184 were male. On the enrollment side, there was a marginal increase of Jamaicans at the 3 campuses of the University of the West Indies, which improved by a mere 1.8% to 15,799 students. Against her, 68.25 were female. The top 3 programs for our undergraduates were medicine and surgery, 385 persons. BSc in nursing, 205 persons, and a BSc in management studies, 124 persons. At UTech, the number of graduates were 2,005, of which 65% were female, whilst total enrollment showed some 12,708, of which 58.8 being female. We need to increase and improve that data, Mr. President. Mr. President, the amount of male, yes. Mr. President, universities are offering professional education as a rule should be preparing students for the working world. If you want to put students first, then employability skills should be front and center. The question for us today is how can tertiary education system respond and play a stronger role in preparing young people for the labor market? You know, the tertiary education can be a powerful engine for building a better society, and the objectives of the university should connect with the needs of the labor market. So bridging programs in the context of employability is a key factor. Mr. President, there needs to be appropriate governance management, financing and equality assurance system in place to enable our universities to fulfill the mission of the labor market demands. And you know, Mr. President, whilst the education and training will produce the academic development and the technical skills, focus must also be placed on the soft skills. What do I call the soft skills? Those interpersonal skills, the confidence, the communication, including the oral and the written, the reading and the listening skills, so that when you get into the labor market, you know about being cohesive as a team player. The innovation, the creativity, to persevere against challenges, to be able to take initiatives, multitasking. These are factors that the education system does not play great emphasis on. And if you are creating students geared towards being part of the labor market, then these soft skills are essentially important. Let us agree, Mr. President, on another thing. Access to training and skills utilization is important. The access for all to good quality education, vocational training and workplace learning is a fundamental principle of social cohesion and economic growth. And this access, however, requires funding and support. So the access to financing that Senator Skeffery is speaking about is critical important. Mr. President, funding, aids, grants, sponsorship, and loans must collaborate and support the needs of the labor market. So if we are going to create that support, the financial needs, then it must connect with the needs of the labor market. And Mr. President, any policy framework that we develop to treat with the access to financing must take into account certain fundamentals. It must take into account gender equality. It must take into account youth employability. It has to take into account people with disabilities. They should not be left out. Mr. President, it has to also take into consideration those students from rural Jamaica. And you know, I believe in lifelong education, and we are promoting migrant workers, where workers today have to move from anywhere in order to acquire employability. I'm not going there with you. But they are migrant workers, but I'm talking our indigenous workers who may have to migrate and require development in education. They also should get the support. And Mr. President, I said that education is lifelong. So also the older workers require the support. So we have to shape policies for all. Yes. No, Mr. President, we must develop a culture of lifelong learning that will benefit the individual, the employer, and the society on our own. And if we're going to focus on the support for funding of tertiary education, then I want to encourage the importance of lifelong learning in Jamaica. We have to address the current issues and challenges as well as to align lifelong learning to the educational economic agenda of the nations. And there are some key factors, There's an immense number of potential lifelong learners in the country, many of whom are not yet active in the landscape. There's a majority of the country's labor force that is currently not equipped in terms of qualification and skills to contribute to the knowledge-based economy that we're speaking about. And we have to ask ourselves the question, where are we in terms of the talent base to match other developing countries? How strategic are we in our development programs at the tertiary level to meet the demands of the new world of work? And there's an immense potential for Jamaica to leverage on lifelong learning for human capital and national development. And globally, to participate in the contribution to the global labor market, we have just, Mr. President, passed a legislation in this Parliament, the International Corporate and Trust Services Act 2016, that we have to upgrade the mechanism and infrastructure universities, the President, that will ensure that the organization remains relevant and responsive to the needs of the community that it supports. It will facilitate a new program of development that will enable the Students' Loan Bureau to look into the future in an orderly and systematic way. Mr. President, from a governance perspective, it enables the board to set new policies and goals to guide the organization and provide a clear focus for the executive director and the staff for program implementation and the agency management. So, that's what I would be calling for. Mr. President, I support the resolution. The focus on development of tertiary level education is an increasingly competitive global economic environment. Is not exclusive to Jamaica alone. We have to be part of this race. Many countries, Mr. President, have expressed the same concern, especially within the context of knowledge-based economies and the need to create a knowledgeable, skillful, and competent workforce. The fact that we are here discussing this signifies, Mr. President, a turning point in Jamaica's education system. So I commend you, Senator Skeffery, for putting forward this motion. Ultimately, the success of a Jamaica tertiary level education agenda will depend on the engagement and contributions of all stakeholders in the country. The state, the industry leaders, the employers, the trade unions, the tertiary institutions and workers. So, colleagues, let us do what we must in this regard to promote and support more affordable means to complement access for financing tertiary education. Let us do this as if the world depends on us. With that being said, Mr. President, I support the objectives of the motion. I rest my case.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gale. Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. President, I thank you so much, and I rise to make my very short intervention and contribution to this motion by Senator Skeffery, and I too wish to join my colleagues and extend my own congratulations to Senator Skeffery. You see, there are times, Mr. President, when persons do motion because, you know, particular interest group may have engaged them, or because it is something that appeals to them personally. I believe that this particular motion is one that really is a personal motion for somebody like Senator Skeffery. And perhaps for a lot of us Senator Reid, who may not have had the luxury, but through support and funding, have been able to attain tertiary education. And before I start, let me just say that much has been said about the special fund, and I suppose Senator Skeffery will speak to it in his closing, but I do support the call for a special fund. I believe, however, that in terms of how that fund should be operationalized, whether it's going to be something within the student's loan or another entity, the fact of the matter is the student's loan as it is not adequate. The funding available is not adequate. And not only that, but the mandate of the student's loan, which deals primarily with tuition, does not cover all the costs that are associated with tertiary education. And so perhaps if one looks at B, then in examining the financial contribution, or in the examination or the Joint Select Committee, then the form and operation of this fund will be discussed. Mr. President, education is the means by which many persons, many Jamaicans rise from poverty. And I did not hear that, Mr. President. in the 1950s and 60s, Mr. President, we had the Jamaican Scholarship Program, and this program, as some of you may recall, was one where only, I believe, one person per parish would have given some assistance to attain tertiary education, and that was woefully inadequate. But we have seen a lot of changes in the area of education. We have former Premier of Jamaica, the Right Excellency Norman Washington Manley, who championed the Common Entrance Program, which opened the gate and allowed more Jamaicans, ordinary Jamaicans, to attain secondary education. And then we have, in the 1970s, the visionary, the game-changing work of no other than Honourable, the Right Excellence Norman Michael Manley, through the introduction of free education. And Mr. President, it is no secret that a lot of us benefited from free education. In fact, many of us now who claim to be in the middle class, Senator Reid, and can enjoy some of the opportunities and privileges of middle class, is because of the work of Michael Manley and free education, which allowed ordinary Jamaicans to attain tertiary education, and so to make the best of themselves so that my generation can have a better life. But, you know, as things are, capitalism have taken over and times have changed. But notwithstanding that, the fact remains that education, the need for education,
remains a desire by so many Jamaicans, but the cost remains prohibitive. And this motion by Senator Skeffery really seeks to encourage a discussion about how can we make education more accessible, tertiary education more accessible to persons. It was Michael Manley who said that free education was not about charity, but rather it was about equity and empowerment. And I believe, Mr. President, that this motion that is before us is not about bureaucracy, it's not about setting up another agency, Senator Gale, but it really is about equity. It is about empowerment of ordinary Jamaicans who want an opportunity to attain tertiary education but simply do not have the resources or simply can't meet the requirements of the Students' Loan Bureau. And I say that, and I wish to share with you, Mr. President and members in the Senate, a brief conversation I had in December, into January this year with a university student, a third-year student, and I'm quoting parts of the conversation. And she said, Ms. Binns, I waited 5 months to get an acceptance letter from UWI, and my family did not see the way out for me either. A lot of roadblocks leading up to July until I got a grant to help me up to last year. Last semester has been a major challenge. Persons said they would help, but nobody really came forward. I really hope things work out because I am on my final lap and I need to complete my studies. I do not want to drop out. I have worked too hard while being here. And she continued, my grandparents and a few family members have been willing to assist with the money, but it just cannot stretch that far. My father is not in my life. My mother becomes emotional when she thinks about my progress. So, Ms. Binns, it isn't easy and personal. Now, the research that was 29%, 20 for a responsibility left them there, you know? And so, one course a semester. It is important. Yes, and it is important that while students are involved in activities on campus, that they also understand the financial implication, not just to their families, but to the country if they go to school and waste time. Yes? So they have a critical role to play. At the same time, as understanding this financial implication, there is an acceptance, quite unfortunate, that voluntarism is on the decline. And so I would recommend that any student who benefits from any assistance, whether government or private sector, that student should mandatorily be required to give some time. Whether it's going to be community service, whether it's at the church, in the community, wherever on campus, they must give some time. And we know the positive benefit that can accrue from that. We have already the JAMVAT program. And having worked with the JAMVAT program, I fully understand how it works. And I think it is good because you have to give 300 hours of volunteer work in order for the assistance, which is good. Yes? And I want to commend that program. And I'm saying that every single Jamaican who benefits, whether from the government or through private sector, should give some time, should give back to the society. When we look at planning, Senator Sinclair, there are issues with our parish councils, with planning. We have students enrolled in the School of Built Environment at UTEC. Their expertise can be utilized. We have a need, when you look at our legal aid, the legal aid council, there is a need. We have students at the Normal Manor Law School. We have students in the Faculty of Law. You can have that experience. Senator Charles is not here. But when you look at our places of safety, when you look at our children's home, you look and see how many students are studying counseling and social work. There is a need. And I believe that through proper coordination and discussion, then these students can play a role in building the society while benefiting from the financial assistance. And so I say that because it was Nelson Mandela who said that education is the most powerful weapon that we can use to change the world. And so it is not just about having a degree, because we see a lot of students who come out of university and they have a degree, and that's really what they have. They just have something behind their names. But how they apply that is lacking. And so we have to ensure that education really is used as a means to transform the world. And in closing, Mr. President, I give my full support to the motion by Senator Skeffery and the proposal by Senator Reid about the Joint Select Committee to examine funding for tertiary education. One of the output of this committee should be the development of a long-term strategy for funding education, because I don't believe that we have thoroughly looked at the issue. The kind of 10 students of classes have a few persons to the benefit of the students' low. Education has to be a privilege for the elite. And with that, Mr.
Disposable income to repay their loans early and on time. And as I said, I think Senator Angela Brown made a point. Also, President, persons are sometimes reluctant as guarantors because of the time the government realize because they can't afford to stay level. The costs, there are real examples of this. School costs for
funding Jamaica well. This as senator, in which I come to education and a country's economic growth and standard of living as learning outcomes are transformed into goods and services. This document is of a country benefiting. A visionary program of Michael in a large part by the proceeds of the bauxite levy, which was used for the human exists in the same way, which could carry us for tuition to university level. Me, good work. The my graduate of tertiary for labor 4 million certification. So, 2002, the document said, I'd set a 15% target participation for the region by 2005. And in 2005, CARICOM revised the target to 20% by 2015. Let me pause there, Mr. President. At 200,000, our workforce of 1.3 million, we are somewhere behind. And we have a lot of catching up to do. Document says countries also develop specific targets. Trinidad and Tobago set a target, as I said before, of 60% by 2015, while Barbados defined a target of 1 higher graduate per household. The authors further noted that a proposal on tertiary expansion, rationalization, and integration suggested a minimum participation rate for the region of 35% by 2020.
Mr. President, the Speaker's time having expired, may it be extended to allow him to complete his presentation?
The question is that the standing orders be suspended to allow the Speaker time to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Against? Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, in the face of the target set by CARICOM, I'd like to ask, since my friend Senator Reid didn't address it, how well are we doing now relative to these targets? It's one thing to set the targets, but if we don't monitor them, it means nothing. How well are we doing relative to these targets? Do we have a target, Minister of Education? Does Jamaica have a target relative to tertiary education? Because you see, Mr. President, if we are, and here I'm not blaming you personally, I'm just talking about Jamaica, you know. I'm talking about the ministry and the ministers of education, because we better get real with this target. If we have the target, I believe, Mr. President, every child in Jamaica should be able to recite that target. Every child should be able to recite that target. Every household should know what that target is, and how each of us will contribute to Jamaica achieving that target and advancing real prosperity. Every child should therefore would be in a position, by knowing the target, be able to aim for the fulfillment of that target. That's what we have to do. And this is why I'm happy, Senator Reid, that we have agreed to a joint select committee, because I take it that your proposal is still on the table. And if Senator Skeffery accepts it, then the foundation is laid for full discussion on tertiary education and the multiple ways in which it can be funded. And the document, the report, which I think should be the basis of the work of the Joint Select Committee, provide foundations for that. That report is entitled Work Done by the University of the West Indies, Higher Education and Statistical Reviews, Issues and Trends in Higher Education, 2013. This is a document that it deals with STEM globally, it deals with the vacancy worldwide for STEM, it deals with funding for the university, measures being taken. This is a powerful document that should inform our discussion going forward, because education must not be a political football. I think we all agree on that. We all agree on that. Move was made to amend the NHT Act to find $5 billion to fund the transformation of education. We have to be creative in funding it if we're going to succeed in the world. And if we turn around, I'm not even going to this, if we turn around and criticize every little move that is going to take us to prosperity, we will never get to that prosperity. We will only shout it out, but never really mean to get there. Mr. President, I wish to close on this issue of tertiary education with a personal story of my wife. Not your story. At least I can say she gave me permission to say it. You will know, my friend, if you see the bag of clothes outside the gate later. Mr. President, my wife was the 6th of 11 children from a rural district near Ado, but in Hanover. In 1974, before I met her, I had reason to go. Indeed she is. I had reason to go to Hanover for rest and relaxation. I had to wait for the next day in 1974, Mr. President, to read the newspaper of the day before. I had to wait for tomorrow to read today's newspaper. That's the communication means at the time. It was a long trip from Kingston, all of those winding roads. What a change that has taken place. But as the sixth of 11 children, she was the first of our family to go to high school. first of her family to go to high school. She was also the first to go to university. This was during the 70s. This was during the 70s. This was during the, of the family. This was in the 70s. She went to university in 76. She benefited, as she just texted me, from free tuition. From free tuition. And the student loan was used for books and issues like that. She had a boarding grant, and she was able to get breakfast out of that grant. That would not have been possible but for the free education policy of the 70s. It is that free education policy that was a liberating point for her family. It was that free education policy that was a liberating point for her family. A family that today boasts several medical doctors, lawyers, PhDs, teachers, and university graduates. At the time when she was accepted to university and was able to go because of the policies of the 70s, a member of the family who today is a senior consultant in one of our hospitals indicated that she did not know that there's something called university. She did not know that there's something called university where people could go and study until her mother told her that my wife was going to a place called university. She didn't know then, but since she has been able to attend and excel in her career. I make this point because when I look at my family, her family, when I see how many of them have owned their own homes, contributing to prosperity, contributing to upward mobility, when I see, I do it deliberately because I intend to reclaim for Jamaica real prosperity. I do it deliberately because what the Jamaican people are seeing is a fake prosperity. I know it would be, So, it is insane the liberation. You know she love you, Kavan. You know she love you. It is seeing the liberating power of people, for people who get to tertiary education. Why I fully support this motion and urge unanimous approval by the Senate. But I'd be remiss if I pretend that what is happening now was always so, and that deliberate measures did not have to be taken to get us to this place. Measures that got opposition, fierce opposition, but the courage of doing what is right led us through those dark days, through those battles. So Senator Reid, it's not only Senator Brown-Burke who supports free education. What we speak about is getting ourselves in a position to make sure it is sustainable. And with the bauxite levy of the 70s, it was. And it has, you know, this middle class in Jamaica today, owes much of its origin to the progressive policies of the senators. With that, Mr. President, I commend my friend and colleague Senator Skeffery, himself a youth from humble beginnings, who understand for the 11th time down that prosperity for self and the nation. No. What I am doing, Mr. President. Mr. President, what I am doing is extricating the word prosperity from those who have sought to claim it and to put it back to the Jamaican people as a whole. So by showing that we are not afraid of real prosperity, I have chosen like Dr. Peter Phillips did in 2012 to speak of the covenant leading to prosperity. Because, Mr. President, after they finish clapping their hands in this Senate, the people of Jamaica outside there will know who is fake when it comes to prosperity. So, my use of it so many times is a deliberate attempt to reclaim it. So, Mr. President, Senator Skeffery, a youth from humble beginnings who understand that prosperity for self and nation comes from us collectively and creatively finding the means to liberate our people. That is what this motion is about. And I am happy, so happy to be able to reclaim the real prosperity. Very pleasing, Mr. President. Maybe.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Skeffery.
Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, is indeed a spirited debate. And it's good that education can have this sort of emotion on all of us. And whether it is prosperity, progress, or more upward social mobility, education is the key to bring that among our people. So let me thank all those members who have contributed directly and those who have given their support otherwise. But I just want to say, Mr. President, that the purpose of the motion is broad-based. And I realize that for some reason, members on the government side attempted to limit it to SLB. That was not the intent or spirit of the motion. And just ask them just to look carefully again at the motion. If you look at the priors, starting from the A, and we're moving to B, we talk for examination. So whether it is a strategic or an examination, it's basically the same activity of funding education, and we talk about means of education, contribution from students, and I clearly said the SLB. So I didn't limit and I didn't exclude. But if we are to be truthful, let us not tell the young people of Jamaica that the financing of tertiary education by the student loan bureau is sufficient. It is not. And I hail it. Very good initiative, doing an excellent job. But if we are here to say All we have to do is to just have a piecemeal approach as used to use by one senator when she sat on this side to the thing. Then we're not going to achieve the objective. And I heard Senator Webby, and I agree, and Senator Sofa Fraser-Binns that. Have to look at the broad review. Mr. President, the motion was not intended to create any conflicts or any confrontation. And as was said, it was an opposition versus government. Although in a debate you will have that, and I have no problem. The cut and thrust of a debate will always have that. My first objective was to have that broad-based conversation and to put this in the public domain. And I think all of us who contributed, we have sought to achieve that. Let me hope that those who report will report it so we can have the conversation continue. I didn't expect to bring all the solutions, and I didn't expect all the solutions to come here today. And I just want to reinforce, because I heard it while the debate, that's why we didn't do it in 2012, 2013, or whenever, the last term went on. I'm not going to be trapped down by the fact that we were in government. We are proud of that. We were there. We did many things, and we didn't do many things either. That's the nature of government and governance. But that's going to stop me from making proposals to forward the interests of the people of Jamaica, Mr. President. And let me say to that side, in short order, when you return on this side, there will be things that you propose for us to do when we are there. In short order, sooner than we know. Right? The motion called for us to think outside the box, Mr. President. The motion called for us to think outside the box, to be bold and revolutionary. Mr. President, I brought this motion to the Senate because I genuinely believe in the philosophy of education not being a privilege, but a right for all our people. And also, not just an economic imperative, but a social need for all our people. And when Senator Brownberg, for example, spoke about how education allowed her to move up that social mobility, many of us inside this chamber and outside can relate to that direct experience. I was saying to Sophia, Senator Fraser-Binns, for example, I'm from a rural area in Cross Keys, South Manchester, and that like a 2-bedroom house that we had. I am the first person to enter University of the West Indies. Since then, many have, and it has motivated not just the family, but members in that community. Because what I always seek to do, each time I have the time, I go back on the corner with the youth. If I can reason with them, we drink some soda together and other things also. Because, Mr. President, I understand the importance of education, even to my own self-esteem, self-confidence. Even if I don't acquire economic wealth like Senator Webby, it gives me that wealth of achievement and social mobility. And that's the value of education. And I know, I can share my experience. When I attended Michael University College, now then Michael Teachers College. At that time, 1990, I was to pay $3,000 for the 3 years. The majority of it was already paid through the Michael Trust Fund and the government. And my mother and I cried because we never know how we're going to get that $3,000. So I understand if it wasn't for the contribution of Michael that made me into a man to be here today, I could be elsewhere. Not because I didn't have the ability, but I didn't get the opportunity. And it's because of the value of an education supported by the state, the trust fund, and private sector, why thousands of men and women are in the teaching profession now and have graduated and in public sector started at level. At that time, Mr. Shirley used to say, Michael is the poor man's university. So I understand. So when I bring this motion and I speak from an era of direct experience. I understand the current economic realities. And we can't, but it doesn't mean that we can't think outside the box and find critical and effective ways to deal with the issues, Mr. President. I realize the members on that side who spoke tried to shoot down the issue of the special fund. I didn't understand then when we opened the debate, but subsequent events in terms of the enhancement fund and the cheers fund, I realized there was a policy directive by the government not to have these special funds. If you're a policy, no quarrel. I want consensus, not confrontation. Right? That's my objective. For real prosperity, as the progress continues. But, Mr. President, if you looked at it, I made proposals, probably not as specific, but you wouldn't have that right here. The diaspora is a community that we have not tapped into sufficiently to help with the social advancement of critical issues in the country. I know many of them are willing to play a part in education. We can have a formal arrangement, we can create incentives to attract them and to help in specialized areas as we advance the growth agenda using education as a driving force. Senator Webby gave examples as to the role of the private sector, which is in the motion, to get the private sector on board also. So we are basically on one. Let us not use every issue that comes to this house and we see it as orange argument. Because whatever our divide, there are many on the orange side or the green side as supporters that come September, their children will be matriculated to university and they don't know how they will enter those gates. Whether you're PNP, JLP, or non-P at all. And if we as the 21 of us here can find a common ground to advance and make that difference, the country will respect us as we move forward. Also, let us, I'm not campaigning for anything. The stage is large enough, we can all play differently. Whether, I heard, for example, when my very good friend from Taylor Hall, and I know this motion can be supported because Taylor Halls don't vote against each other, whether you're on that side or this side. But you made the argument about focusing on secondary education, for example. But in this 21st century, as Senator Brown said earlier, it can be one, then the other, then the other. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, up to the mid-90s, it was all right to have a high school certification, and you could get into jobs. Many of the civil servants, then, they went straight from high school into the ministries, and whether through in-service training or part-time study, they end up having their first degree, second degree, up to the PhD level. Today, if you have C-Sec subject alone, even CAPE subject, the jobs are not there for you. So it has to be a multifaceted approach as we place focus on all the sectors. Recognizing, of course, that the early childhood is always the best way to start to make them bright the first time. And as was said by Senator Brown, and I reinforce it, economic growth does not guarantee access to all. Because in the 60s, for example, the statistics will tell you we have some of the higher growth rate, but the access and the enrollment was at the all-time low. It does not guarantee, because there's a difference between growth and equity. What we want is equity across all areas. We never have enough, but it was not focused then at the policymakers to expand and create more opportunity to unleash that talent for our people. Higher education, as Senator Gill alluded to, is critical to enhance productivity. And today, we have to realign. I agree with that. It is, and it doesn't mean that we have not started. I know that the former minister looking at that, and I know the current minister looking at it, you realign the curriculum in the secondary schools, for example, to align it with labor market needs through your TVET rationalization program, emphasis on STEM education, and so on. So it's not that we don't have it as an agenda, but we just need to accelerate it and give it more resources to make it a reality as we go forward. Mr. President, one thing that society must always seek to do, whenever there is a proposal, and there are so many analysts and persons who are consultant in areas, but we always tend to find all the reasons why it can't work. You know, but we need to have a cultural shift. While we look at why it can't work, we must also, in the same vein, look at why and strengthen the reason why it can work and overcome those obstacles that prevent us achieving the target. And if we have that new process, that new thinking, it might create a difference as we search for solutions. Many of the things that we now enjoy today as a society, when those leaders of vision started it, many don't try it and say it cannot work, and today we call them legacy and institutions that are transforming our society. So, Mr. President, I want us to think big and to think bold. As I said before, I want consensus, because I don't want this motion to die here. I want it to gather steam and move across and have all the stakeholders. So the minister, reading his presentation, gave proposed some amendments, discussed it on our side, and we are more than happy, because we seek to compromise today to advance tomorrow as we move forward. So, Mr. President, if the proposal that was given, and we accepted it, in the prior, be it resolved that, A, he proposed to remove the word establishing and put the word determine. Not quarrel with that. You can make a word be divide the interests of our young people. So I accept that. B, there are no proposed amendments. He proposed, I understand your policy, though not totally in agreement, but he proposed to delete, he proposed to add C, another C. So we have A, B, and to add C. That this examination be done by a joint select committee of Parliament and recommendations be made to the government for improvement for financing the Student Loan Bureau, SLB, and other means of tertiary education funding. I'm fine in favor with that proposal. Let me hope that it still remains as you are. And then to delete, might be it further resolved and replace it as such. Be it further resolved that the Joint Select Committee consider the ways in which there can be a broadening of subsequent access to SLB loans and grants for all applicants with improved terms as well as other funding mechanisms for tertiary education. If that proposed amendment still remain, we on this side, we have no problem in accepting it and moving forward in the interest of society. So, Mr. President, in closing, I remember Senator Brownberg said, no amount of loans can help all our students. If she had 10 loans available to her, she was not able to access them also. Grant funding, scholarships, bursary are critical to the funding mechanism.
Sorry, Senator Skeffery, you have identified the amendment, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to put it for consideration. So I'm now wrapping up.
You identified the amendment and you're gone on again, you know.
Yeah, Mr. President, but remember, I'm closing the debate. I've not expired my time. So I thank all those who presented again. Thank you for your patience. Let us use this as a catalyst to transform the system and to give our young people that fighting chance to make a difference for their lives and this country, Jamaica land. That we love, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, with that, I now ask you to present the motion as amended. Yes, I put the motion, put the amendments to the motion, and then the motion as amended, if it's fine for you.
Mr. President, if it pleases you.
Thank you, Senator Skeffery. Senator Reid.
Yeah, Mr. President, I mean, we on this side, sir, are very proud to have participated in this important debate, because on our side, we are absolutely committed to education, the advancement.
Senator,
yes, I'm going to, yeah, but I'm praying, sir. I'm praying, Mr. President. But the point, Mr. President, if you allow me, is that because we are already advanced, there are several initiatives they're already rolling out to facilitate the expansion and access to tertiary. We are proposing an amendment to the vehicle that instead of having a joint select committee of Parliament, we are proposing to have a multi-sectorial committee that will be hosted by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, that, Mr. President, will accelerate the intention of this motion. Parliamentary time is very, very precious if we want just a talk shop, because in any event, even after the submission from the Joint Select Committee.
Mr. President, on a point of order. To describe a Joint Select Committee as a talk shop is certainly more unparliamentary than anything I've said that has been ruled unparliamentary here, and I ask that it be withdrawn. A Joint Select Committee of Parliament is not a talk shop. It is an important mechanism established by the Constitution and the standing orders of the Parliament. May the Minister be asked to withdraw.
Senator Reid, what you are suggesting, you're not accepting the...
Mr. President, if I may.
Senator Golden, with the greatest of respect, whether it's his own proposal or not, there has been an amendment to the motion. I understand that what Senator Reid is saying is that they are not accepting it. So whether it comes from him or not.
Mr. President, the motion as presented by Senator Skeffery resulted in Minister Reid making a proposal that this be sent to a joint select committee. It is a forum which is appropriate for discussing a weighty matter that affects the future of our country in such a fundamental way as how tertiary education is to be financed. It allows persons to come from outside and make presentations which are covered by the media. There's proper recording of everything that is said. There's a clerk that ensures that the reports are prepared in a professional way, and it is open and transparent. Senator Johnson Smith, when she was over on this side, brought a motion seeking to send to a joint select committee certain issues. That joint select committee has been constituted and is continuing. So she appears to have some objection to the process of a joint select committee. Right now, that is the only joint select committee that has been constituted under this current Parliament. And there have been times when there have been several running at once. And it can be chaired by different people. In this instance...
This is a presentation on the amendment.
This is a presentation in support of the amendment that was proposed by Minister Reid, which has found favor with this side. That we would like to have this matter sent not to something outside of Parliament, which we do not understand, but to the Parliamentary Joint Select Committee.
Senator Golden, as I understand it, you are addressing the amendment, and you have made your point. Senator Reid, your point that you were making is that you are not supporting, and you have proposed an amendment. No, what you have done, you are not accepting the amendment.
Mr. President, I have heard the rejection by Senator Reid of what I thought was a well-thought-out proposal that found favor on this side. On both sides, from the discussion that flowed after he made that wonderful proposal that is now being incorporated by the mover of the resolution. As the senators, my understanding when Senator Reid made the proposal, which was accepted, was that the idea was that a joint select committee that would include both houses would sit and look at the matter. Honestly, and bring all the stakeholders together to make their contribution so that a recommendation can then be made. I am still not clear why Senator Reid at this point is choosing to separate himself from a worthy suggestion that he made that found favor to strengthen the motion and that has now been incorporated. I thought we had said that this was not going to be, that education was too important for us to play politics with it. I thought that's what we said. And honestly, right now, today, I am a disappointed member of this Senate hearing that proposal from Senator Reid, who, the Minister of Education, who had made such a profound and wonderful and impassioned plea for a change by the mover.
All I understand the minister to have been saying is that he thought that there was a vehicle which would more effectively, with you, Senator Skeffery, just hold on now. As I understand the minister was saying, was that he identified a vehicle that could more comprehensively discuss and arrive at a consensus or conclusions in relation to the issues. If it is that you have, both of you have made a presentation suggesting that it is in fact a joint select committee that you would prefer, let us hear what the minister has to say. 1 minute, Senator Morris. 1 minute, Senator Morris. Senator Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. And on the same point, and to buttress that which you were making just now, the point has been that this side so shares the importance of the issue and the desire to move it along with alacrity, that it was thought that instead of competing with constraints on parliamentary time, to take the matter within the precincts of the Ministry of Education and constitute a multi-sectoral body with the opposition and with the ability to have other members, whether financial sector, etc., the very persons who you would be calling to attend a sitting of a joint select committee, that the matter could move more effectively with the ministry and the minister himself driving it. So it was on consideration of really the desire to move it forward and not to lightly change perspective or even to disparage the parliamentary process as perhaps is being perceived or inferred. But it's really just about suggesting a more effective mechanism to move quickly. But if it is that you prefer to maintain the space in Parliament and to compete, because we know they're doing in that other place, they're doing double sittings until the end of the sectoral, and thereafter there will be the special zones of operation committee, which is going to have a heightened and accelerated agenda and will therefore be a strain on parliamentary staff as well as the time to sit here. If it is that the opposition prefers to keep it within the precincts of a joint select committee and to then be subject to the same constraints, then the minister is certainly willing for that. But the intention was to try and move forward. And the suggestion was mine, not his, so it's not about changing, and we discussed it as a team and thought it would be a better and faster way to get the discussion going. But if you prefer to insist on a previous discussions, but you have to have the parliamentary team, the committee, you have to have the members all present. So, Mr. President, I just wanted to clarify the issue so that no disparaging comments are made, because the intention was really the most sincere and best. So there's no need for us to take the discussion out of the positive intentions to start to make whatever type of...
I'm disappointed in you.
You know...
Mr. President, I thank the Minister for clarifying her intent in taking the discussion in the direction in which it has gone, and I thank her also for her willingness to allow the original position to be that which is pursued, because we feel that that is a much more appropriate way of proceeding, and we thank her for that.
Thank you, Senator Skeffery. So, that being said by the Minister, I thank you for the intervention on all. I put the amendment or amendments to the motion as moved by Senator Skeffery. Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it. I now put the motion as amended. Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it. Minister?
Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today, save that I understand there is a point of national importance to be raised on the motion.
Mr. President.
Senator.
Thank you. I rise on the motion of adjournment. Excuse me. Mr. President, today is recognized globally as World Health Day, and I rise to bring awareness to this fact and to encourage Jamaicans to join with the government and the citizens of the world as we work towards making healthy decisions in our lives. Mr. President, we have to ensure our health in all dimensions, and that includes making little decisions, little mantras, one of which I work towards myself, which is don't sweat the small stuff. Even when they're not so small, they really don't impact very much on your lives. And today here in Jamaica, the Honourable Minister of Health, Dr. Christopher Tufton, will be spearheading our national efforts. Mr. President, with the latest figures indicating, as they have for a number of years now, that the top 4 leading causes of death and disability in Jamaica, being strokes, ischemic heart disease, diabetes, and hypertension, or as we commonly call it in Jamaican language, heart attack, sugar, pressure, and strokes. These illnesses, Mr. President, are responsible for approximately 40% of deaths in Jamaica over 5-year-old. These are all diseases whose occurrence and severity can be significantly reduced with the choices that we make in our everyday lives. I invite all present and Jamaicans at large to use today as a marker to start or continue making healthy choices in our lives. Healthy decisions about what we eat, how much water we drink, decisions about substance use, stress management, and conflict resolution are all decisions that will make daily that potentially impact on our health and longevity. Mr. President, there is also one particular lifestyle decision that we can make which can positively impact all of the above and our lives in general, and that is exercise. Today, Jamaicans, under the patronage of Minister Tufton, will embark on developing the habit of exercise within our Jamaican population. He will launch at the Emancipation Park the Jamaica Moves campaign. Activities started from 9 a.m. this morning and will continue until 10 p.m. I think you're all being personally invited to join between 4:30 and 10 today, where you will have a series of health promotion initiatives to inform, educate, and screen persons for ill health. There will also be a new and exciting program, the Getting Moving Challenge, which will see 14 prominent members of the public and private sector community doing 10,000 steps per day for a month. These steps will be shared with the public through media partners and on an online platform to inspire and motivate all of us in Jamaica to move. Mr. President, I am pleased to say that opposition MPs, Mr. Julian Robinson and Valerie Nita Headley, are 2 of those 14. And immediately we can see the positively we can see the impact of a healthy decision. Mr. President, for the everyday man who just wants to start an exercise program, I will just extend that in my own private practice when someone comes to me, I say to them that the first challenge of starting a program is not about the exercise itself. It is about finding the time and allocating the time in your busy schedule. Just taking 20 minutes to make a walk and come back, and a little stretching can go a far way. And so, as we recognize today as World Health Day, I implore us all to reflect on our lifestyles and the choices and actions that we make as we try to live healthier lives. Let us all as Jamaicans move towards better health and do so in unity. Thank you.
Mr. President, it would have been nice to have been given a little notice that this was going to be raised on the motion for adjournment. Yeah.
I have to apologize because I was informed, I approved it, but in truth and in fact, because my own health has not been so up to scratch. I've been kind of going, I apologize. But we get the picture, we need to move a bit more. Senators all recognize that. We need to move a bit more, do a little more exercise, cut down on the salt, sugar, and rum.
Your apology is accepted, Mr. President. Yes, non-communicable diseases are, of course, such a major destroyer of lives in the country, especially with rising levels of stroke, heart problems, and the like. And the lifestyle of the 21st century with the proliferation of digital communication and more sedentary forms of communicating and socializing lends itself to a more passive day-to-day existence, which is inimical to our health. So we support a national effort to get us all to be more active and raise our heartbeats and sweat and try and eliminate the high levels of cholesterol and all that comes with it and so on. So we support all that. The reduction in smoking was a very major and important initiative of the last administration. I want to salute former Minister Fenton Ferguson for that bold initiative on his part. And this is another one which I think is worthy of support, and I'm glad that it has attracted bipartisan input on some of the promotional activities. So, Mr. President, we would join in the remarks that have been made that in relation to the positivity of this particular initiative.
Thank you, Senator Golden. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask that the Senate be adjourned to the 21st of April?
Question is that the Senate now be adjourned and to be adjourned until the 21st day of April 2017. Those in favor? Against? The Senate now stands adjourned.